There was a transition for me from job to business. There's a transition from business to ministry, and all of these things in life, but there was a commonality in all of them. And for me, all of them came with those things you talked about initially. Everybody tries to find strategies to manage versus skills to master. We try and beat up fear of failure with a mantra or an affirmation. We try and find these things to overcome the challenge when they come up. That's that life by default. Life by design is me being who I'm created to be and overcoming my circumstance. The problem is it doesn't change my belief about me. It just beats down my thoughts until they come into alignment, at least temporarily, with what I'm trying to do right now. Change leads to habit. Change doesn't lead to transformation.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
Hey, you ever felt held back by the fear of failure or the weight of imposter syndrome? Today, we're speaking with Mark Collins, a coach dedicated to helping Christian men discover and live the life they were created for. Over the past decade, Mark has guided over 500 people through the Bible-based Life Mastery course, empowering them with scriptural tools to overcome obstacles. It's a little chilly out here. I don't know if it's chilly where you're at. But Mark's insight on living intentionally by design rather than by default makes him the perfect guest for Hindsight the Podcast. Welcome. How you doing this morning, Mark?
I'm doing greatly. Thanks for having me on for the conversation.
Now, I know we already talked about this, but for the show, where are you calling in from today?
I'm in a town called Bellflower. So for anybody who's not familiar with Southern California, I always tell them it's about 25 minutes away from Disneyland. So everybody typically knows where that's at.
Yeah, or at least have an idea. So this is Hindsight the Podcast, and gave a really brief intro about you and the work that you're doing. I'd like for you to tell a little bit more about yourself. And like I said, it is hindsight, so if we can go back and just give a brief description of your journey to this point so far before we start to talk about the things that you're doing and who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, Lee. And I love the work that you're doing. Hindsight's really interesting. So it's interesting to look back on your life and many of the things, that transitions that you have. So for me, things that resonate with some of the things that I believe are a focus of you and your community. There was a transition for me from job to business. There's a transition from business to ministry. All of these things in life, but there was a commonality in all of them. And for me, all of them came with those things you talked about initially, right? It's the fear of failure that comes alongside. It's the, trying to succeed away from the fear that you feel like you have, or imposter syndrome, or whatever those thoughts are you have in your head. So, growing up with a father that was, we could unpack some of your childhood. What I tell people that I work with you is you're either living from who you're created to be or what your life has told you. And so for me, some of those things that life had told me was that, I'm not as good as, can be as successful as, not as smart as, some of those things that you hear. And for me, part of that journey, Lee, was proving it wrong. Yeah. Believing that there was more than the life I was living and trying to figure out ways to show it. And that was in, trying to succeed in business and getting my bachelor's degree, and then moving into business ownership, something I was always passionate about, of wanting to, work on my own dream versus live out somebody else's. And so in that place, walking through those things and trying to find in personal development the ability to not have fear of failure. Really, what I tell people is this: believing that there was more of the person on the inside than I was seeing on the outside, and trying to figure out a way to get there. And so for me, that was those things that we had talked about, and creating a successful business, moving from job to business. And any of the people and you're working with that have maybe made that transition, understand that, boy, that's a leap of faith. And then there can come some insecurity and issues. So in unpacking and unwinding some of those, and having a Christian faith and trying to use the Bible to figure out, the person God created me to be, I started to find some tools and instruction on being able to live it out. Transformation versus change is what we talk about. Okay. And in that place, kind of started to develop the course and some of the things I had. But it came from all of those milestones in my life.
So from working for someone to owning your own business to ministry, and then before all of that, it's little baby Mark. So what's an important lesson that you've learned early on in your life that you still carry with you today?
That's a great question. And, I hate to bring it into the realm of coaching. But for me, the course I have, Life Mastery, the book Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, it's that understanding that you're more than your circumstance. And I say that because, everybody has life that we walk through. We all have great experiences. We all have tragic ones and some things that are somewhere in between. But in that place, it's starting to understand that many times we take on the identity of what we walk through. So for me, I was, struggling in school. Mathematics was something that I just couldn't wrap my head around. And so, you find those things that you're not good at. And as a youth, you find the things that you're not as good as everybody else versus those things where you're better, and you use those to identify yourself. So because I was struggling in that subject, I wasn't as smart as everyone else. And in that place, you start to live it out, and you make decisions from there, and it changes the trajectory of your life, the things I'm going to do, the things I'm going to invest in, the abilities I have, right? Like, am I going to get a job or get a business? Am I going to go in finance, or I'm going to go in, some other job? Am I going to really believe that I can have that high level position in my life, or am I going to settle for where I'm at? Because, those things tell you, it's the unspoken truths in your life that you're not as good as, the value statement you have on your life. And so, to unpack that a little bit, what I would go back and what I've learned through my transformational journey, as I've documented through Life Mastery, is you're apart from your circumstance, your value, your worth, who you're created to be, what we call identity. Who you're created to be is something apart from your experiences. Your experiences don't tell you who you are. They come from who you believe you are. And if who you believe you are aligns with who you're created to be, now all of a sudden you're going to have that life that you're created for.
I tell you what, you touched on something that I guess I'd say I'm passionate about, and it's getting the message out of paying attention to the stories that you're telling yourself.
Yeah.
You touched on it with school. You weren't good at math, and you were good at some other things. I wasn't good at math either in high school. And then your mind creates a story. Well, I'm not as smart as everybody else.
Yeah.
And then it runs with it. If you don't corral it in and bring it in, you're going to run with it, and you laid it out perfectly. You're going to make decisions based off of the stories that your mind is telling you.
Yeah.
And understanding that you control the story that you're telling about yourself.
That's good.
Is power. So you gave an amazing, not analogy, but a scenario, an actual real life situation and how it played out in your decision making earlier. You corralled it and you took control. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. I didn't say that. It wasn't a thank you, but it's just, I thank you, for putting that out there. How did your journey, how did your journey inspire you to focus on helping other men overcome fear and imposter syndrome? When did you realize what imposter syndrome was?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And the truth is, Lee, I think for a lot of us, we understand the outcomes of it more than we understand the title of it, meaning this. What I knew was there was doubt in times, right? So moving into the business transition, I'm not sure what business, success and or experiences you've had, but for me, success didn't come right away.
Yeah.
What typically comes, at least in our business, is what came right away was the cash outlay. And the planning and the purposing and the creating and the developing and the bringing those tools and those things alongside. Well, all of those are negative financial outlays, meaning you're not getting income from them. And then you have the belief system that the income's going to come. And then it doesn't. And then it still doesn't. And then your savings account is diminishing. And then you're wondering, did I really do the right thing? Was this what I'm supposed to do? For those who are people of faith, you wonder, did I hear God right? Or am I failing at this and going to blow it? Again, mindsets and thoughts, right? Those thought processes that you have. And so for me, imposter syndrome was more of an belief systems before I knew there was a title. Now it's a popular, not really popular, but a common thing that people realize. But the symptoms, the thought process behind it was something I understand to begin with. And so there was that part of it that, you start to live it out and you're trying to figure out, again, the person I believe I'm created to be versus the person that's showing up. It doesn't change the circumstance, but here's the interesting thing. It changes me and the circumstance. As you talked about, I mean, you said it exactly. It changes who I am, the belief that I have. And in that place, it determines the answers that I'll give, the motivation and the passion that I'll have in it, the clarity of decision-making that I'll put into it. It has all of those outcomes. And so there's an action and an outcome that comes from it as well. Why did I want to give it to other people? Well, the truth was, growing up and getting into my 20s, 30s, 40s was when I got my second degree black belt, got my bachelor's degree, started and ran a successful business that we sold for a profit. And in those places, what I found was, those labels that we put on ourselves, fear of failure and imposter syndrome, didn't leave. They just came along for the ride. And
they don't. They don't leave. Yeah. Go ahead.
Exactly. And what I found was that was common. I'm working with clients at all levels of success. I remember a client who had multi-million-dollar transactions dealing in the real estate and business development area and, high level of success. And he was what we call in the industry bivocational. So he was a pastor and a business owner doing both. And so he had children that were thriving. He had a marriage that was healthy. And you look at him on the outside and you think, well, that guy's got it all together. What could be the problem? If I had his life, right, we talk about, then man, everything would be gravy. The challenge was that, being in relationship and friendship with him before he was a client, what we didn't realize was the same things that I walked through. It's that 3 o'clock in the morning where you wake up in a cold sweat because you know where your balance sheet is, you know where your finances are, or that job thing, right? I have a job and I don't know if I'm going to have it tomorrow because, downsizing, laying off, or whatever the thing is, or you're having a financial struggle, this came up that you weren't aware of and you don't have money in the bank account to do it, right? It's those things that wake you up in the middle of the night. Well, he was one of those people as well, where every transaction, every commitment to a business goal and or activity was an opportunity for him to fail.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that on the outside, but you realize it on the inside. And so for him, just like a lot of us, success wasn't joy and, celebration. Success was a relief because I didn't blow it. Okay, we made it through. We figured out the challenges. We came out on the positive side financially. Okay, I'm okay. Yeah. But you have to recreate it every single time.
And that's something.
And so for me, the passion I had to help other people, first off, was seeing the transformation in my own life.
Right.
Where I tried to use personal development, books and training and all those things. I mean, spent, hundreds and thousands of dollars on things, again, trying to figure out what's the key, what's the formula for that man of confidence and assurance, that person that was living out his passion, wasn't really holding back from fear, but was really investing in with all he had. How can I get that guy to show up on a continual basis? So I'm not waking up at 3 a.m. So I'm not, every transaction is life or death, right?
Yeah.
And so in finding it out in myself, again, for me, it was unpacking the Bible as instruction, not philosophy. And in seeing those instructions, starting to see transformation, not change. And a lot of things, honestly, Lee, that I was working with, there's positive outcomes to many personal development programs. The problem I had with them was twofold. One was they brought change, not transformation. Okay. And change is really just habit manipulation.
Right.
And what I found in my own life, and I see with others I work with, is the habit you use to get there is a habit you have to maintain to stay there. So you never really overcome fear of failure. You just hold it at a distance. You take positive action towards something, but you're really still dealing. It never gets victory. It only gets maintenance. And so in that place, to me, the outcome of that is just exhaustion. That didn't look like what God promised when his scripture said, he who the Son sets free is free indeed. It didn't look like freedom to be able to have to maintain a habit for the rest of my life to make sure that I can have the success that I want without having the fear that comes along with it.
Right.
So there was that part. And the other part was really understanding that haven't found a person yet, apart from a transformational journey. I haven't found a person yet that wasn't dealing with imposter syndrome, fear of failure, fear of success, something that was telling them that they weren't going to succeed at this thing.
This guy. Yeah.
And so for me, it was wanting to give people what I didn't find. I couldn't find a transformational program, so I created one. And in that place, Lee, you understand, I've been on that other side.
Yeah.
Where I'm desperate for know that there's more, where I don't want to have, every day in business be a determination of success or failure, depending on what happens. If my employees stay, if the income matches, if I don't have, all these things going on, I didn't believe that was the life I was supposed to be living, or anybody was.
Yeah.
And so my passion at this point, and as I'm investing, as while we're on this conversation, why I wrote the book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default, is giving people a formula, a blueprint for transformation, not just habits they have to maintain.
So let's unpack that a little bit. You look at decisions, you look at habits. You make a decision to change a habit. Habits are typically things that you habitually do, right? It's automatic.
Yeah.
So what's like give me your insight on the difference between habit changing and transformation? Because it seems almost as if it's the same thing, because if you change a habit, then you, in a way, transform. I love what you said about you have to continue to maintain that changed habit. I get that. But if it's a changed habit, then I don't know if there's maintenance to it. So I'm just want to be clear in, what I'm saying, with me.
I love that.
Okay.
So let's take fear of failure.
Okay.
How do you overcome fear of failure? Okay, well, there's two systems. There's the change system and the transformation system. The change system is, okay, so what I'm going to do is create affirmations and mantras so that when those thoughts of failure come up, I'm going to give myself positive reinforcement of, my outcomes, the things I do, and the person I am.
Right.
Glorious. Here's the problem with that. You and I both know you don't believe it.
Yeah.
And so here's where change happens. All right. So, gosh, it's so much to unpack. So let me try and do this clearly and concisely so I don't confuse you and me.
Thank you.
The book I have, the title is Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default.
Okay.
That first experience I talked about is life by default.
Yeah.
Which means that something is going to happen, negative thought patterns, understanding that you're either living from who you're created to be or what your life has told you. I'll never have fear of failure living from who I'm created to be. I'll only have fear of failure or any fear or imposter syndrome or any of that because of what my life has told me. Your past informing your present, determining your future.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. Your past informing your present, determining your future. Creates fear of failure. What's that?
Nothing. That's part of my. No, I know that's part of the hindsight thing, But go ahead.
Exactly.
And we'll talk about it.
But that's how everybody lives, because it's us living by default. We don't know there's a different way, so we only live by what we know.
Yeah. Yep.
And so everybody does that. God created us that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn from the things that you do. The problem is not the experience you walk through, but the identity statement you take from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just math that I was struggling with. It was a young man who wasn't as smart as everybody else. That was the identity statement.
Right.
I was great at some things. I was not as good at others. Interesting thingly, as a sidebar, I went to college and took math all the way up and through calculus, passing what was at that time, I maybe still be, the highest level of math possible. So was I really not as smart as? Or did I have a temporary struggle in my life that had created an identity statement that it wasn't even the issue of that? It's the next thing you don't try because you don't believe you can. It's the next time that you struggle at something that you're like, oh, see, you're a failure.
Yeah.
See, you're not a smart. Yeah. Oh, they had the answer, you didn't. Oh, you're not really as good as they are. It's the identity statement you take that lasts throughout your life. Sorry, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent.
No, I love it. I love it. Go ahead.
So that's the life we're living.
Yeah.
Back to fear of failure. Fear of failure happens. The typical system is, hey, two things. Create mantras, create affirmations to beat it down when it happens, to remind yourself, no, I'm a person of value and worth. No, I'm somebody who's intelligent, I'm smart, I'll have answers to the things I'm walking through. All of these things that you're doing, they're generic mantras that don't work because they don't align with who you are. Transformation is, first off, not starting with your habits, but starting with your identity. Who are you created to be? That young person, was he created not as smart as everybody else? Or did he have a temporary educational and struggle that he was walking through? Yeah. Which one was true? Like you'd said early in this conversation, it depends on which one you believe and which one you tell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So fear of failure, you're walking through fear of failure. Change my mantras. The problem is it doesn't change my belief about me. It just beats down my thoughts until they come into alignment, at least temporarily, with what I'm trying to do right now. Change leads to habit. Change doesn't lead to transformation.
Okay.
And it doesn't really lead to change, because here's how I know it. For everybody listening and watching this right now, because you've said it once and that fear subsides, you can walk forward, you can make your decision, you can take your action, whatever the thing you're working through.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean fear never came back? Does that mean it never happened again when challenge happened? When your bottom line didn't look like you wanted it to, when the income didn't come in, when that client decided not to take your service or your product, when your job got lost and you don't have income, now you're on unemployment. When unemployment's running out, when your kids get sick, when you have a bad doctor report, when things are challenged in your marriage, do those fears leave or do they come back?
Yeah.
Because if they come back, then that is change. It's a temporary thing, not a permanent solution. Yeah. God doesn't call us for change and temporary solutions. He calls us to transformation. What's the difference? Let me show you my scenario. I start with who I'm created to be. Who are you created to be? I'm a man of worth and value. I'm a man who's the answer to every circumstance that I'm walking into. I have solutions where there's problems. I have answers where there's questions. I'm fully capable of everything I'm walking in. I've been given the gifts and talents and abilities for my life. I'm not only going to be able to manage them, but I'm going to master them because that's who I'm created to be. Yeah. I have within me everything I need for the life I'm called and created to live at the highest level that I'm created to live it. That's an identity statement.
Yeah.
We can walk through some of the things that we do, but so I start with an identity statement.
Mm-hmm.
So fear of failure comes. Oh, that's interesting. Fear of failure is coming in my life. We still use affirmations, but what affirmations do I use? Ones that are just generic ones that I'm, again, beating my thoughts into submission?
Okay.
Or they're ones that are aligning with my identity? Remember, Mark, you're a man of answers and solutions. You have answers to every problem that you walk through. You have solutions to everything that you're walking into. You're created as an answer to your circumstance, not a question to be answered. And in that place, my mantras, my affirmations align with my identity.
Yeah.
Do I do it when it happens or before it happens? So for us, Lee, we tell our folks this. Do you train for war but while you're in it or before you get there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for us, it's, again, the affirmation, but it's an affirmation that's tied to alignment. It's not me trying to use somebody else. Oh, this person's amazing. And if I say I'm like them or if I do like them, then I'm going to be like them.
Yeah.
First, there's two problems with that. The first one is, what if you're right? Then you're always going to be second place in your life, an imitation instead of an original. What's the other problem with it? You're never going to actually get there because you and I both know you're not them.
Yeah.
I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not whatever the person is. Put the name on, I'm not Beyonce. I'm not this great person. I'm not this wonderful person. Doesn't mean I can't have success at that level. It means that when I try and imitate somebody else, I'm always going to fall short and it's always going to sabotage me because, again, who you believe you are, you'll become. Mm-hmm. And in that place, I can never measure up to them. And so it'll always find it. You'll give up. Wow. You'll try it for a while. It doesn't work out. A challenge comes up. You set it aside. You're like, I guess that didn't work. What's next?
Okay.
The difference between change and transformation. So I start with who you created to be.
Mm-hmm.
I remind myself of who I am until I see that person showing up. So fear of failure comes. After a while, all of a sudden, fear of failure comes. I recognize that this emotion is coming up and I'm like, no, that's not me. And it leaves. I don't fight it. I don't beat it up. I don't remind myself of who I am. So we do have the same affirmations. The difference between change and transformation is change is me trying to measure up to somebody I don't believe I am anyway. Mm-hmm. Transformation is reminding myself of who I am until that guy shows up. And here's the interesting thing. Early on in my journey, years ago, I would do these affirmations 5 times a day.
Okay.
Because life happens for all of us. And what that means is I've got a track record of reminding myself of lies and believing it. Well, how do you overcome lies? You overcome it with truth. You overcome it by telling the truth once? No. But every time a lie comes up, I remind myself, no, this is the truth.
Yeah.
I'm a man of answers. I have solutions for every challenge I walk into. I have answers for every problem I'm going to face.
Yeah.
Well, here's the interesting thing. After a while, do I have to remind myself when I'm already showing up as the person I'm created to be?
Right.
Where fear, doubt, worry, all imposter syndrome starts to try and enter into my thoughts. And I'm like, no, that's not me. Yeah. And I casually walk into who I am. So what does transformation look like? Me living from who I'm created to be at the highest level I'm created for in every area of life. I don't have to remind myself who I am when I show up. It's this phrase I use in our conversations with people. My whole goal in your life is to unlock and unleash your hero in hiding. Well, when the hero shows up, do you have to remind him he's a hero or just going to let him or her be?
Yeah.
So what does transformation look like? It looks like effortless excellence. It doesn't look like habits I need to manage to beat to death those fears, those worries, those issues, those thoughts that keep coming up. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for giving the definition. Now, here's the next challenge. How difficult was it for you to get to your, identity statement? How, that doesn't just come to you. So that takes some thinking about. That takes some inner, just looking within yourself and figuring it all out. And, in your case, you probably work with God and, just to figure out who it is and what your purpose was. So
that's a great question.
Yeah, for you specifically, how did that process go?
Yeah, and it's the same thing I teach the folks I work with. So I tell people, Lee, as you know in your own life, for me, creating this course, Life Mastery, and writing the book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default, wasn't me having a great idea for other people's lives. It was me living it out first and then investing it in others second. And so the same journey I walked on is the same journey I walk others on. And it starts with this. It starts with an I am statement. So for us, it's an I am statement. Who are you created to be?
Okay.
And so I tell them your I am statement has to be three things. It has to be personal, right?
Okay. Write this down.
It has to be present tense.
Okay.
And it has to be positive. Obviously, the third one, if it's negative, then you're not first off telling the truth. And second off, you're not helping yourself. Personal. Who are you? And it's not, I have the wealth of Elon Musk. I have the talent of Beyonce. I have the skills of LeBron James, right? It's not me trying to, again, imitate somebody else, but understanding who I am. So it's personal. I am. It starts with an I am. Interesting thing, right? In Scripture, God said, I am that I am. In the I am was everything he was. And everything that came after it was who he was, created to be. In his case, he was never created. He was here from the beginning.
Right.
But it's the same statement he gives us. The I am, everything that follows that is who you're created to be, not what your life has told you. Okay. So if you're listing your past, you're probably listing what's wrong. Yeah. So personal, who are you? Present tense. I'm going to be a person of great decisions. I'm going to be a person of dedication. None of that is the truth. Yeah. Here's what most people don't realize. You already have on the inside of you everything you need for the life you're created for. You just don't know it yet. It's not adding things to you. It's unleashing and unlocking what's in you. Yeah. And in that place, it's present tense because I already have it. I could talk about it in Scripture, but I'm sure we could go on forever on that. But here's the truth of the matter. God never invests more things in you. He reveals to you what's already been placed in you. And so it's present tense. Who are you? And of course, it's positive. Yeah. God doesn't create negative. He doesn't create worthless. He doesn't create average. He doesn't create defective. Nothing he ever has created has been anything but perfect. The things that are standing in the way, we can unpack at a later time. So it's understanding that it's positive. It's understanding what's the value I have. And so was it easy? No. Here's the thing that most people realize. When they try and create an I am statement, what they really create is a resume. And so the first thing is, you're more than what you've done. It's not your accomplishments. It's not your title. It's not your role. It's not your position. It's not your possessions. You take all of those things and you set them aside. What's left is who you are. And it's not this place of emptiness. I'm nobody now. It's saying, what character do I have? What value do I have? What worth do I have? What innate capabilities do I have? What are the things on the inside of me that are unique and specific to me? Not that other people don't have them. I'm a compassionate person. Am I the only compassionate? No, but I recognize that in me. Right. I'm a person that's passionate about those things I care about. Am I the only one who is? No, but I recognize that in me. That personal, positive, present tense. So who are you? Who's this person? Take all that stuff, set it aside. Because here's the truth of the matter. You're either living from who you're created to be, or you're letting your world tell you who you are. With your positions, your possessions, your title, your role, your income. And so we strip all that away and we say, okay, well, who are you? Your character, your value, your worth. Who is this guy that we have? And there's a couple of other tools that we use to really start to flesh it out and create a whole picture for you. But it starts with this thing. Who are you? And as a person of faith, you're rightly, I start with a conversation. And I invite the people who are people of faith to do that as well. And the conversation is, God, who did you create me to be? Many times we know it. Many times when we start to strip away those things, we start to say, oh, okay, this is who I am. This is part of me. Right at your character. It's the character of the man or woman that's looking in the mirror, not the outcomes that they create. My identity creates my outcomes. My outcomes don't create my identity. We've gotten it wrong. When we get that pivotal shift, then it starts to become a lot easier to see ourselves for who we are.
Okay. Well, you preaching this morning. Hey, I appreciate it. No, because a lot of times you know a lot of these things. To your point, you know a lot of these things, it's in you already, but you don't know how to tap into it. So that's why I asked the question, like from your perspective, how did you go about figuring out who you are, who is your I am? And thank you so much for sharing that. I love it when the guest comes on and you're able to be a little vulnerable. So everything isn't perfect. Everything isn't here. So thank you for sharing your journey. But here's a practical question for the listeners. What do you think holds most people back from living the life they feel called to?
Yeah. Great question. Super great question. And this is the pivotal one, honestly, Lee.
Yeah.
And it's, I tell people the answer is in the title of my book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default.
I love it.
I don't know any person that I've ever met, to be totally honest, who isn't living by default apart from understanding transformation. And what I mean by default is we just believe that life happens and I respond. It's an example of my own life in that I have fear, I have imposter syndrome, I had a father who I felt like I never could measure up to. I have experiences in my life like struggling in school and other things I could unpack. I mean, we all have experiences.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that you try and overcome them one of two ways. Well, you affirm them or overcome them, unfortunately. You affirm them by saying, I guess I'm not smart enough, so I'm only going to take this job, or only going to do this thing, or only going to allow myself to dream this high.
Yeah.
Or you try and overcome them with, no, I'm going to be, people like this. We hear their stories, and maybe some of our stories are like that. No, right. I'm going to prove that wrong. I'm going to do this amazing thing, and then I'm going to really feel like I'm somebody that's worth something.
Yeah.
The challenge is, again, like that person I talked about and many other clients I have in my own journey as well, you get to that mountaintop and you find out that failure came along for the ride. Imposter syndrome, worry, stress, anxiety, whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah.
All of these things, you can't, when I tell people this, you can't success away failure or fear of failure because it always comes along for the ride. And so what's the biggest challenge? Most of us are living by default, believing that I've got to manage, I've got to change, I've got to overcome these things. I'm not good enough, right? I'm trying to manage my life, and overcome those things by that success or that whatever.
Right.
And in that place, it doesn't work because two things happen. The challenge comes along for the ride. It never leaves, which is, people like this. Anybody listening knows people like this.
Oh, yeah.
They're in TMZ. They're in stories. We hear them in, social media. We hear them all over the place where they're amazing at this thing. And then there's another part of their life that's a disaster, or they were amazing at this thing. Then they sabotage their life with crazy decisions, insane actions, and now they are just a total disaster.
Right.
It's because they never really believed they were that person. They were using that thing to try and overcome who they really believed they were. And unfortunately, we always rise or fall to the level of the person we believe we're created to be. So there's that's default. There's the person who's living out those things and trying to, again, if I don't understand who I'm created to be, my world has to make up the difference.
Right.
If I understand who I'm created to be, then I am the person being unleashed into my world.
The world has to make up the difference. Woo! I can't write down. I'm glad that we're recording this because I can't write all these amazing books that you're putting down. But I absolutely love you can't success away fear of failure. Power. Power. All right. So we got to move it along. I'm sorry. Like I said, you're preaching.
I'm sorry.
And
we could talk all day.
I love it. I absolutely love it because a lot of things you're saying and you're putting some context that I hadn't considered, right? And
for sure.
And so this helps me to grow, and hopefully it helps the listeners who are listening to grow in certain aspects of their life where they're lacking or where life is filling in. Right? So anyway, So you're coaching, but do you still coach?
Yes, for sure.
How has coaching impacted your personal understanding of purpose and faith?
It's interesting. Boy, that's a great question, Lee.
Yeah.
It's interesting. They say this, that every time you teach, you learn also.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, but it's not me forgetting the tools that I've been using and then relearning them as I go.
Yeah.
But it's seeing, if I can just be totally honest.
Yeah. Please.
It was my experience and the things I've walked through that gave me the ability, the framework for life mastery. But the underlying thing that's the real truth is that it absolutely was God-driven. I didn't, these things in my own journey wasn't the journey that I walked in and figured out God along the way. It was God guiding me within those things, including the structure and the framework and the strategies for the course. And so apart from that, you relearn it, you reinvest in yourself by investing in others.
Yeah.
There's this sense of awe. I'm not trying to inflate the course or the things that I'm doing, but seeing God's hand in it, and seeing in His hand in it the transformation that other people have had. And there's this place of stewardship, not ownership.
Okay.
Of believing that this thing has been given to me, and as I try and invest in other people, I do the best that I can with the things that I've been given. but in seeing the amazing transformations that other people walk through that align with the ones I've had in my own life, and starting to see, wow, it's what I tell people in our course and in the things that I do to coach them.
Okay.
We talked about life mastery, living a life that you're created for in every area at the highest level that you're created for.
Right.
But in that class, it's this area where the thing that you're created for, the impact that you're supposed to have in the world, it's that thing that drives you, that you invest more time in, that you try and find blocks of time in your life that you can invest in this thing, right? It's the thing that matters. It's the one that makes you forget meals. It's the one where in my case, your spouse has to remind you, no, man, we got to go do this thing. You got to pull yourself away because something else is supposed to happen. You're late for things because you're putting more time. You're doing it to the very last second you can, because this is your passion. This is your thing. That's what life mastery is for me.
Okay.
That's what investing in people with these tools and the transformational strategies is for me. So with me, it's just that reaffirmation of I'm living exactly who I'm created to be, as I'm helping people try and find that thing, that life for themselves.
Yeah. All right. Well, on the theme of helping people, and ding, 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 tune into this part. What advice would you give someone struggling with self-doubt and just looking for direction?
Absolutely. So the thing I would tell you very quickly is this. Everybody tries to find strategies to manage versus skills to master. And I don't mean skills as in a skill set. I mean that we try and, like we talked about earlier, we try and beat up fear of failure with a mantra or an affirmation or whatever the thing is we want to call it. We try and find these things to overcome the challenge when they come up. That's that life by default. Life by design is me being who I'm created to be and overcoming my circumstance, not me fighting my circumstance and trying to figure out who I'm created to be.
Yeah.
So what does it look like? It looks like an I am statement. It looks like you saying who you are. If I was to flesh that out with a couple of quick sentences, the second tool we use for people is we give them an assignment to create a celebration list. Yeah. I give them 20. I've written over 100. The celebration list answers this question: what do you love about you? Many times, I know men specifically because I'm one of them, even when we succeed at things, we're critiquing them by the things we could have done better.
All the time.
And doing that has a certain level of value, but it also has this level of saying you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Until it's perfect, you're not good enough. And that's a lie. And so I asked them to do a celebration list for themselves. What do you love about you? What character traits do you have in you that you love? The third is an accomplishment list. I asked them to do 20. I've done 130 something right now. The challenge is when you get beyond 20, 30, 40, all the marquee stuff is gone. Now you're writing stuff like, I show up to my job every day. I pay my bills on time. We minimize the ordinary successes we have in our life because we're waiting till we get to the Super Bowl, the World Cup, the Olympic stage before we say, now you've done it.
Yeah.
What we don't realize is when I celebrate the ordinary successes, I'll have the extraordinary ones. If I wait until I have the extraordinary one, I usually will never get there.
Yeah.
So using those three things, and we unlock them and unleash them. Now that I've got the affirmation that aligns with me, I have an I am statement, a celebration list, and an accomplishment list. Now I have a pretty good example of who I am. I'm a person who has worth and value. I'm a person who's worthy to be loved, cared for, and celebrated. I'm a person who has a track record of success in my life. Yeah. Minor successes leading to major victories. Now that you know who you are, now you can attack your thoughts, words, and actions. Our transformational strategy is mastering your thoughts, your words, your actions. I won't unpack the other two. I'll unpack the first one momentarily. Mastering your thoughts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are either aligning with who you're created to be or they're lying to you. There is no in between. There is no gray area. They're either aligning with who you're created to be or they're lying to you. How do I know who I'm created to be? Look at your I am statement, your celebration list, and your accomplishment list, and you'll get a much better idea of who you've been created to be. Okay, well, how do I change my thoughts to align with that if they're lying to me? Simple. Remind yourself of who you are. You have 3 examples: I am statement, celebration list, accomplishment list. You don't fight. You don't train for battle when you're in battle. You train for battle before. Many people use it as a tool to try and beat their thoughts into alignment when they get to be negative. I tell people, if I invest in myself before I need it, I'll show up as myself when I need it. If I invest in myself before I need it, I'll show up as the person I'm created to be when I need it.
Yeah.
So you have your affirmation list. You remind yourself of who you are. You do it on a consistent basis. I can go over the science or the spiritual aspects of it, but here's the truth of the matter. Your thoughts will change over time so that when challenge happens, I automatically show up as the person I am. My thoughts are in alignment with who I am, and I have the outcomes that I'm created for. Yeah. Mastering your thoughts starts with affirmations that align with who you are. It's not a fantasy of who I want to be, an imitation of somebody else who's there. It's who are you first? And in that place of doing that work, now all of a sudden I give myself the truth to live out, and then I can be living that life of effortless excellence, who I'm created to be in every area of life at the highest level I'm created for all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I love it, man. You like boom, 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 boom. I mean, you make it so simple. And I know the people who are in your courses, the people, your clients, they're probably just overflowing with energy and excitement about the next steps and also becoming the person that they're supposed to be as well. So I've asked you a few questions. You've mentioned the book. What's the name of your company or the coaching company?
It's Freedom for Life.
Freedom for Life.
It's the organization I started, and the course is Life Mastery, the book Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default.
Okay, and I go back. Okay, so I've asked you a few questions. You gave me some amazing answers. I'm sitting here writing quotes, listening in, learning, taking it all in, seeing how I can be better. But is there something that you like to talk about that we haven't covered just yet?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I ask questions, I'm asking for me. I want to know these things, but I know you have so much more to give. So what you got for us?
Well, rather than talk about the course, I'll talk about you as in the listener, the person watching, and you and me as well, Lee. Mm-hmm. So you've heard my journey, and it's probably like a lot of people here where you're trying to figure out, how do I overcome these things in my life? I'm having success, or I want to have success, but I'm finding I'm holding myself back, or I don't like the fact that I'm that guy struggling with these issues. I should feel better. I should have more. I should feel joy instead of relief.
Yeah.
And you're maybe trying some things in your life. It's, the business development, if I'm perfect at my business, then fear won't happen. Or if I have these generic mantras, or I follow, whoever, that marquee person, we know all of their names, then I'll become more like that person. And they don't have struggle, so I don't. By the way, I was in a conversation, listening to a conversation of several months ago, about half a year ago, a guy who's like a 8-9 figure entrepreneur, amazingly successful. He said this in the middle of his conversation. He says, every time I have a new business transaction, I deal with fear of failure. Mm-hmm. And he said this statement that drove me crazy. He said, I guess it's just part of the journey of success. And I just wanted to scream, no, it's not. and I say this right now because a lot of times we think, oh, well, at that level, it won't happen. Or at that next level. This was a person who is objectively amazingly successful.
Right.
And still dealing with those things. And so if you think that, well, when I get there, it won't matter. Well, I'm sorry, it will.
Right.
And so it's the journey and you becoming who you are. So why do I tell you all this? I went through a bunch of courses, studied a bunch of materials. And again, they brought change in habit. They didn't bring transformation. I created a transformational program because I couldn't find one. Okay. And I believe it'll transform your life amazingly, perfectly, completely, because I've seen it in other people as I've seen it in myself. But here's the one thing I can't bring to the table. It's your belief in yourself. Here's the one thing I got right in trying this program. Kind of worked, didn't. I stopped. Trying this book, these philosophies, tried to work, it didn't. It felt like more things I just needed to manage. I don't need a bigger checklist. I need freedom. And so I tried all these things and they didn't work. The one thing I did along the way that brought me to the place of, in my case, creating the transformational program, and maybe in your case, you implementing the one that is already created. It was me believing in myself, betting on myself one more time until I actually saw that man show up. I actually started to see that there was outcomes that were exactly who I was created to be, that it was working. I wasn't managing. I wasn't changing and keeping habits. It was me really showing up as me. My thoughts had changed. My emotions had changed. My actions had changed. I was successful before I started this. So it didn't stop those things from happening. It actually unleashed more of them. But the one thing I got right was I believed in myself. I bet on myself one more time. I refused to believe I wasn't going to find it. That's the one thing that you bring to the formula. That's the one thing that you bring that I can't, is this unwillingness to give up on yourself. to settle for where you're at and say, oh, I guess this is it.
Yeah.
There is so much of a lie in that. There is no, this is just it, whether you're a person of faith or not. But if you are a person of faith, God never leaves anybody where they're at. There's never just enough. There is always more of an impact. And it isn't more things I have to do. It's more of you that we need.
Yeah.
And so what's the thing that you bring to it? I can't. It's this belief in yourself. It's this willingness, like I said, to bet on yourself one more time.
Yeah.
Just because 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 things didn't work, I've been there, doesn't mean that you won't find the one, as long as you don't give up on yourself. If you do that, then the only thing I can guarantee is you'll find the life that you're created for.
Man, hashtag be more. All right, Mark, hey, how can the listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
Appreciate you asking, Lee. So I try and be a one-stop shop, so everything I have is on my website. It's freedom-4-life.net.
Okay.
freedom-4-life.net. And then so I actually have my book out there as an ebook. It's less than $10. And you can imagine that you can actually start your transformational journey on less than $10. I tell people, Lee, I wrote the book as the quick start guide to life mastery to give you something you can read today that you can implement this week, that you can transform in your life this month. So that's a quick start guide. It gives you some, those tools and strategies, some of the things you can walk through, and more of my personal journey. So you start to see some of the background, some of the hindsight looking back in my own life. So you see my own journey, so you know that yours isn't the only one. But also the course is out there. So if you're that person that's like me, that's, man, I don't want to have the abridged, I don't want to have the first few chapters like you can get on Amazon, but I want the whole thing. The course is out there as well. All of the bells and whistles, A to Z, all of the strategies for you to live out your life. All of those things are on my website. freedom-4-life.net.
Oh, man, I love it. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your story and inspiring me and the listeners to live with intention and faith. And today we covered some powerful ground, from transforming our mindset to overcoming fear and embracing purpose. And for those listening, look, remember, be more. I'll keep it that simple. Just be more. All right. And it doesn't mean that you're not enough. It just means that you have more to give. Okay. And then remember also to subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast. Stay updated on the most episodes filled with insights and motivations to guide your own journey. And also to listen and learn from amazing guests like my man here, Mark Collins. Thank you so much for being on the show, Mark.
My joy. Thanks for the conversation, Lee.
Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.